Back when I was a teenager, I was always interested in the original Crow movie, because at the time, when it came to pop culture, I was always drawn to very dark, edgy stuff, and if you're familiar with some of the other movies and games I've covered on this channel, then you'll know for a fact that my tastes haven't really changed that much since. However, for some reason, I just simply never got around to watching The Crow. That was until April of this year. As you're probably already aware, back in March, Lionsgate released a trailer for their remake of The Crow, which by the time this video is published, the remake should already be out. I just so happened to stumble across this trailer, and even though the remake doesn't personally interest me all that much, it did remind me that I still haven't seen the original movie. So I figured that, with the remake on the horizon, now would be the perfect time to finally watch the original. So, fast forward to April, where I managed to track down the film on streaming services, gave it a shot, and what were my thoughts on it? Well, let's get into them. The Crow was released in 1994 and is directed by Alexproyas, who later went on to direct movies such as Dark City and I, Robot. It stars the late Brandonlee, and the film is based off a 1989 comic book written by James O'Barr. The story centers around a musician, Eric Draven, and his fiancée, Shelley Webster, who are murdered by a gang during a home invasion. 1 year later, Eric Draven is resurrected, brought back to life by a crow so that he can take revenge on the gang that murdered both him and Shelley, so that he can finally bring peace to their souls and rest. Now, I mentioned previously that I never got around to watching this movie back when I was a teenager. Just to give you an idea as to how long it's been since I was a teenager, I'm now 27 years old. However, even though I only just watched the film for the first time a few months back, it kind of feels like it was a part of my teen years. This is because the film reminds me of a lot of the stuff I loved back then, from the aesthetic, the soundtrack, the action, just about everything really. I know that if I watched this movie back then, my 16-year-old self would have absolutely loved it, obsessed with it, and been all over it. And even though now I'm an adult in his late 20s watching this film for the first time, I have to say that I still really love this film as much as I imagine my younger self would have. Hell, after watching this film for the first time, I went out, bought a copy on Blu-ray, and watched it again. The Crow is a film that, even if I were to nitpick, I can't really find anything wrong with it because I personally don't have any criticisms. This is, in my mind at least, a perfect movie for what it's setting out to achieve. First of all, I haven't seen Brandonlee in anything prior to The Crow, but I absolutely loved him in the role of Eric Draven. I like him in this role so much because he has a very strong, distinct screen presence, and there's this aura about him that I can't really put into words. As the Crow, Eric Draven is obviously very edgy, but at times he is also a surprisingly playful character which endears you to him. He reminds me a little bit of V from the video game Devil May Cry 5, because even though both V and Eric Draven have incredibly edgy qualities to them, both of these characters also have a sense of playfulness to them, which balances out the edginess and makes them both incredibly likable. And not only is Eric really likable as a character, but also sympathetic. Knowing just how young Brandonlee was when he died during the making of this film is upsetting. Not only were the circumstances of his death completely avoidable, but there was so much untapped potential within him, and I have no doubts that he would have gone on to do some great things in the film industry had he lived on. but at least he managed to achieve a legacy for himself through this movie. As the son of Bruce Lee, it would be difficult for most people in his shoes to try and get out of their father's shadow, but not only did Brandon succeed, but he built an equally legendary legacy for himself that I don't doubt will never be forgotten. The second thing I really liked about this movie is the atmosphere. The film takes place in a city that feels very familiar, while also feeling somewhat otherworldly and gothic. It feels like an almost fantastical alternate reality of our real world, reminding me a lot of the old Tim Burton Batman movies, as well as alexproyas' other film, Dark City, which is also another movie I really like. The film's atmosphere is accentuated and enhanced by its soundtrack, featuring songs by Nine Inch Nails, The Cure, Rage Against the Machine, and more. The music featured in this movie goes a long way to help further establish a memorable identity for this film. My favorite song from the movie is probably the end credits song, It Won't Rain All the Time, by jaymerrick. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly. I think it's a perfect song to end the film on due to how emotional it is, and I've been listening to it a lot ever since my first viewing. Speaking of how emotional that song is, this leads me to the third thing I liked the most about this movie, which is also my favorite part about this entire movie: the emotional, heartfelt core at the center of the story. The Crow is a story that deals with very dark and heavy subject matter. However, it's not a completely bleak and hopeless movie. There is so much light in the heart of its darkness. The movie's main message is that even if you lose someone, they will always live on for as long as you continue to love them, which is not only a very sweet message, but it's also a message that feels all the more powerful when you take into account not just the death of Brandonlee, but also the tragic passing of James O'Barr's fiancée, whose death was the catalyst that inspired him to create the Crow in the first place. This is also a message that personally resonates for me as well, because my dad, who passed away when I was very young, was also a fan of The Crow, which I didn't even know about until after I saw the movie. I found out he was a fan when I visited my mom a couple days after seeing the film. We were chatting about what sorts of movies and shows we were watching lately, and I told her I saw The Crow, to which she told me that my dad loved the film back when he was still alive. This was a very cool discovery for me, and through this movie I kind of now feel a little bit more connected to him, even though he's long gone. Another message the film promotes is that even though there's a lot of pain and tragedy in life, there are also good things to look forward to as well. This is expressed through the phrase, "It can't rain all the time," which is a quote that is brought up over and over again throughout the course of the movie. And as mentioned previously, the end credits song is named after this phrase. This quote was something that has stuck with me ever since I watched the film for the first time, and I've grown to love it, especially because at the time of watching this movie, I was going through an incredibly difficult time of my life where I was really struggling with my mental health. As mentioned previously, I really liked the character of Eric Draven, aka The Crow, and honestly, I think he's quickly become one of my favorite movie characters. However, I also really like the characters of Sarah, played by Rochelle Davis, and Sergeant Albright, played by Ernie Hudson. Starting off with Sarah, the main reason why I like this character is because she helps further humanize Eric Draven, being this child neglected by her single mother that Eric and Shelley used to look after from time to time back when they were still alive. Sarah has a lot of love for Eric, and vice versa, which I could definitely feel while watching the movie. And it was a very sweet subplot that I thought enhanced the film's primary message about love just a little bit more. As for Sergeant Albright, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. The character is a very likable and fundamentally good person. Ever since the deaths of Eric and Shelley, he helps look after Sarah in their stead, and when Eric was the first to die, Albright stood by Shelley's side and looked out for her in hopes that she would recover. He is a good man, trying his best to look after others and make a positive difference despite how tough the circumstances of his personal life are during the events of the story. Anyway, so those were the main things I liked the most about this film and mainly wanted to discuss in this video. I can definitely see why this movie is so beloved as a cult classic and why a lot of people really resonate with it. Plus, we don't get a lot of movies like this nowadays that have the same feeling and vibe that this one has. The Crow is a fun, supernatural revenge thriller, but it also has a very emotional message at its core that, for me at least, helps elevate the film beyond a simple revenge thriller to something so much more special. As for the remake, like I said, it doesn't seem that appealing to me personally, so I'm probably not going to check it out, but if I ever do, I'll try to keep an open mind. At least the action looks decent, plus I like that they seem to be doing their own thing, because I feel like trying to mimic, replicate, or replace the original movie would be disrespectful to Brandon Lee's legacy. Plus, 90% of remakes and reboots are completely unnecessary anyway, so if you're going to remake or reboot something, then you may as well do your own unique spin on it, differentiate yourself from the original. Although, with that being said, I certainly could do without the hideous hairstyle they gave Bill Skarsgård in the remake. Sorry. Anyway, that's all I have for today's video. What are your thoughts on the original Crow movie? Whatever they are, feel free to comment them down below. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching.